about them in detail also in the previous video. Okay, so if we actually simulate a deadlock, okay, let's say deadlock is a table, okay, which is standing on 4 legs. This is just a hypothetical example. Assume a deadlock is a table which is standing on 4 legs, right? Then we can also simulate those 4 legs as these 4 conditions. Okay, table, the overlying tabletop is the deadlock, and the 4 legs of the legs can be 4 legs of the deadlock or the table can be thought of as these 4 conditions. Even if one of these conditions fails, the tabletop will not be able to stand. If we break even one of these legs of the table will fall definitely. Okay, the same happens with deadlock. Even if you violate one of the 4 necessary conditions and don't let them happen together, then we can actually prevent a deadlock. Okay, and these are all the 4 conditions for that, okay, which we just saw. Okay, but how do we avoid all these conditions, right? What are the different mechanisms? How do we go step by step on all of them and try to make sure that these conditions do not happen? Let's look at that. First, how do we make sure that a system can eliminate the mutual exclusion condition? Okay, so the mutual exclusion condition says or must hold for non-shareable resources. Okay, so this kind of a condition happens for non-shareable resources or for a resource which has one instance. That is, several processes cannot simultaneously share a single resource. Okay, if a resource have a single instance, multiple processes cannot hold that resource. Okay, think of mutual exclusion from the resource point of view. Okay, and that is in fact that a resource can never be used by more than one process simultaneously. If there's a resource, if it has a single instance, it cannot be used by multiple processes simultaneously. Okay, which is fair enough as well, right? If it's a single instance, multiple resources cannot share it. Okay, if a resource could have been used by more than one process at a time, right? Agar aisa hota, if it would have happened that a process could that a resource could have been used by multiple processes, then the condition of deadlock will never happen, right? There are 3 processes requesting for a resource and there are 3 instances as well. Bang on. There is never a condition that is going to take sure that the deadlock will happen, right? But the condition is, the idea is that this condition is difficult to eliminate because some resources actually exist, such as hard disk, printer, that are non-shareable inherently, right? If there is a printer, only one person can print at a time, right? And there are shareable resources also like read-only file, right, which do not require mutually exclusive access. Multiple people can read for a file at a single point of time and thus they cannot be involved in a deadlock. Okay, so that is why this condition is a little difficult to prevent because there are non-shareable resources and it is difficult to make them shareable at all points. So here what we do is we just you have to just make sure that if it's a single resource for a single instance, no multiple processes are trying to access that single resource. Okay, that's what the overall idea is about mutual exclusion. And the very big example for that was the printer, right? A printer cannot be simultaneously shared by several processes. Okay, whereas there are shareable processes that do not require mutually exclusive access. Okay. Next one is the elimination of the hold and wait condition. So the hold and wait condition was that the process at least like one resource. In that case, a process is holding at least one resource and requesting a resource as well. So you're holding something and then you're waiting for something else as well. Okay, so there are 2 possibilities and 2 ways to make sure that this condition does not happen at all. Okay, the first one is that if a process request, right, if that a process is basically requesting to be granted all of the resources at once, right, prior to the execution. So it's not like currently there's a process P1, right, it is requesting for a resource P1 right now, okay, R1 right now, and then after some time it is requesting for another resource, then it's wrong. Okay, the first way to solve the eliminate the hold and wait condition is that every process, whatever resources it requires, should be requested, right, process should request also all the resources at once and get all the resources at once as well. Okay, it should not be like that it's getting half resources right now and half resources later. No, all of the resources must be requested in the start itself prior to the execution, and all of them must be allocated and granted also before the execution. Okay, that is one way that you can make sure that the hold and wait condition does not happen. The second way, right, in which the hold and wait condition can be avoided is to disallow a process from requesting resources when it has already allocated resources. So it's like I am holding something and then I'm asking for something. Okay, so then the operating system is saying that if you want allocation of resources, do not hold resources. Okay, if a process is requesting for resources, it should not be holding any previous allocated resources, because that's the typical condition of a deadlock, right? You're asking for resources and then you're holding for resources. Okay, so the first condition is that if you need to request for something, request all of it in the start itself before execution and get allocation of it. The second condition is that if you are requesting for some resources, you should not be holding any resources. Okay, a process can only request for resources when it is not holding any resources. Okay, so this strategy basically requires that all of the resources a process will need must be requested at once, and the system must grant either all the resources or none of the resources. You can't just allocate half of the resources. Okay, and if the complete set of resources, let's say a process require 8 resources and out of which only 5 are available right now, okay, then the process has to wait until the entire set is available. So it's not like a process require 10 resources, only 6 are available, and the operating system just allocates 6 of them and told the process that 4, when they will come, I will allocate to you. No, that's not possible. If all the resources are not available, you are not granted any resources and you have to wait until all of them are available. Okay, and when the process waits, however, also it cannot hold any resource. It's not like, okay, I need 3 more resources, I'm holding 2 right now. No, if you are in a waiting state, you are not supposed to hold resources. Okay, so thus the wait for condition is denied. Okay, if a process is holding something, then it cannot wait for something. Okay, and using this, the deadlock, and if these protocols are followed, we can say that the deadlock cannot happen. Okay, but this strategy, trust me, can actually lead to sometimes a serious waste of resources as well. Okay, sometimes it may happen that some processes allocate so much resources, some require some other, but then it just leads to, sometimes it can lead to like disadvantage. Okay, so one of the disadvantages of both of these protocols can be that first, that the utilization of resources sometimes become low. Okay, since the resources may be allocated but unused for a long period, right? You may allocate resource but they remain unused. Okay, here and it can happen quite frequently in hold and wait. Okay, and the second disadvantage is that it can lead to a possibility of starvation. Okay, a process that needs several popular resources. Okay, there are, let's say, some resources which are very popular. Now they're already always occupied by some other resource, that the resource which actually requires it, right, it never gets it. Okay, because at least one resource is always holding to those popular so-called resources. Okay, so these are the two conditions which have their own disadvantage and advantages, but there can be certain procedures put into place which can lead to the elimination of these two conditions. Okay, next what we have is the elimination of no preemption condition. Okay, so the non-preemption condition basically can be alleviated or removed by forcing a process which is waiting for a resource that it cannot immediately be allocated, okay, right, to relinquish all of its currently held resources so that other processes may use them to finish. Okay, so there is a process, okay, which is requiring 5 resources, okay, but it only got 3 right now. Okay, so but it still requires 2 more resources. So the condition of no preemption says that there is a process which is requesting for some resources which are not currently available because they are being used by other processes. So the good thing to do is, if you are requesting for something which is not available, then please just let go of the resource which you are currently holding as well, so that those resources can be used by someone else, because currently that process cannot use it, right? Why? Because it requires some more resources, and since some more are not available, why don't you let go of your current hold resources so that at least some other process can basically finish. Okay, so this kind of a strategy requires that when a process is holding some resource, right, and it is basically denied a request for additional resource. So I am holding some resource and the request for some other resource for me that I want is basically denied. So that is where you can apply this strategy. Okay, the process must release its held resources, and if necessary it can request them again. Okay, so I let go of my 3 resources because 2 were not available, so in future I can always request for those all 5 again with some additional resources as well. Okay, and this kind of a strategy basically makes sure that the no preemptive condition does not happen effectively. Okay, so that's what pretty much the idea is about no preemption over here. Okay, all right. Next, what we'll do is we will talk about the condition of circular wait. Okay, so what happens in the condition of circular wait is that this is the last condition and that can be denied. Okay, here the last condition can be eliminated or denied by imposing a total ordering on all the resource types and then forcing all the processes to request the resources in order. Okay, so what you do is you order all the resources, you order all the processes based on some ordering. Okay, and every process can basically request for resources based on that ordering. Okay, and you have to force that ordering. Okay, this strategy imposes a total ordering on all the resources type, and it requires that every process requests the resources in a numerical order. Okay, and with this rule, the resource allocation graph can never have a cycle. Okay, so what do is you assign numbering sorry, you assign numbering or you assign basically priority to every resource. Okay, a process cannot request for a less priority resource. Okay, this ensures that not a single process can request for a resource which is utilized by some other process, and hence no cycle will be formed. Okay, to be honest, out of all the 4 approaches and all the 4 methods that we saw, circular wait is actually the one which is like, the most easily implemented, and it's the most practical one to implement as well. Okay, so that's what the overall idea is. I know it can be a little heavy for you to understand in the first go, but trust me, if you actually take real life examples now to understand all of these, the overall idea actually become very, very easy. Try to understand through examples. Take off like a real life situation. Deadlock is actually a very real simulation of an example, right? There are cousins who fight for small things, right? I want something and the other person has something. It's a deadlock. My cousin won't let go of a thing that he or she wants, and the person who has it also won't let go of a resource that the other person has, right? Simple situation of deadlock and multiple easy way to basically get rid of it. Okay, so make sure you go through each and every examples. All of these examples would give you a very good and a fair idea of how these conditions can be avoided. Okay, we have mutual exclusion. First, understand what mutual exclusion was, and then come back here and understand, how do we can avoid mutual exclusion. Okay, that was basically like we either keep resources shareable, right, or we do not basically make sure, or we make sure in fact that the processes cannot simultaneously try to share a single resource. Okay, then we have hold and wait. We had 2 strategies for hold and wait, right? The first strategy was that you request for everything at once and you get all of it at once. Okay, whereas the wait condition was that if you're waiting for something, you're not going to hold the resources. The no preemption condition was kind of very similar, which said that if you are requesting for a resource and the request is denied, then please let go of the resources that you're currently holding so that the other processes can finish. Okay, and here the circular wait condition was that every process will have a priority assigned to it, every process will have a ordering assigned to it, and every resource will have priorities and ordering assigned to it, and the process can only request the resources in that ordering. Okay, and they cannot request for anything which is out of order. And out of all the like the methods that we took and the approaches and protocols we took care of, circular weight is the one which is actually the one which is practically viable to implement. Okay. So I hope this is clear to everyone and you got a fair amount of idea of how this is being taken care of in terms of deadlock prevention technique, right? Where we are trying to prevent deadlock by making sure that any of these 4 conditions fail. In the next video, we are going to talk about deadlock avoidance, of how we can do the careful allocation of resources so that the technique or the idea of deadlock is avoided altogether by looking at the concept of safe and unsafe states. All right. Okay then. Thank you so much for taking a look at this video, and I will definitely meet you in the next one.